Hello everyone, welcome back to SDH-HV Bercerita, brought to you by Sekolah Dian Harapan Holland Village. My name is Edward and I'm going to read Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. Chapter 17. The bet is won. The door and windows of Phileas Fogg's house on Savile Row were all closed. The curtains were drawn. Nothing in the house suggested that he was home. He had been ruined by one silly detective. Ruined. After traveling all that way, and after overcoming danger and all the other bumps along the way, it was finished. He owed the rest of his fortune to his friends at the Reform Club. What little money he had left was in his carpet bag. Phyllis went to bed that night with a heavy heart. Auda did too. She felt so bad for the kind man who had rescued her, but she didn't know what she could do to help him now. The next morning, when Passepartout brought up his breakfast, Phyllis asked him to tell Auda that he would see her after dinner. He needed to spend the day making sure his affairs were in order. No one felt worse than the faithful butler. He knew it was all his fault they had lost the bet. If he had just told the monsieur about the detective, things would have turned out differently. Passepartout could hold his feelings in no longer. "But sir, why aren't you mad at me? This is all my fault." "I don't blame anyone, Passepartout. Now go find Miss Auda, please." "Yes, sir." Passepartout went off to tell Auda that Phyllis wanted to talk with her after dinner. For the very first time in a very long time, Phileas Fogg did not set out for the Reform Club at exactly 11:30. Why did he need to go? He was a day late. His friends already had the check. All they needed to do was go to the bank to cash it, and so Phileas stayed at home. He stayed in his room and did a lot of thinking. Auda did the same. It was only Passepartout who buzzed around that day from door to door, trying to hear if he was needed. After dinner, Phileas and Auda sat down to have their talk. "Auda," he said, Will you forgive me for taking you to England?" What do you mean? You saved me." "Please let me finish," he continued. "I was a rich man when I brought you here. Far away from your home, I could have helped you start a new life. Now, I'm ruined." "I know, dear Phileas," Auda said. "But all I ask is that you forgive me for being a part of that ruin. It's my fault you had to rescue me in the first place." "That's nonsense. You need to be safe, and now you are." "That's true," she said. "But what will become of you?" Phyllis looked at the kind girl that sat in front of him. "I have no true friends and no family, but I'll be fine." "Well," Auda said, "if you'll have me as your wife, I'll be your family. We can face the future together." Phyllis stood up. He didn't know what to say. His eyes lit up and his lips trembled. Auda said nothing. She just waited for him to speak. "I do love you," he said. "Yes, by all that is good and honest, I do love you. Let's get married." They held tightly to each other's hands. Passepartout came into the room and saw the pair smiling happily. Phyllis said, "We're getting married. Do you think it's too late to talk to the Reverend at the Marylebone Parish?" "You'd like to get married tomorrow on Monday?" Passepartout asked. "Yes, tomorrow," Phyllis answered. "Yes," Auda echoed. Passepartout ran off fast as his legs would carry him. Passepartout raced into the sitting room where Phyllis and Auda were waiting for him. "Marriage," Passepartout said. "Impossible tomorrow." He was out of breath. "What are you talking about? Tomorrow is Sunday." "No, it's Monday," Mr. Fogg insisted. "No, today is Saturday," Passepartout said. He grabbed Phyllis by his collar and pulled him along. They jumped into a cab. It was now 8:30 on December 21, and Phileas Fogg had 15 minutes to reach the Reform Club. Phileas Fogg's bridge partners sat in the grand hall at the Reform Club watching the clock. They looked at one another and tried to read the newspapers to pass the time. Of course, the only thing in the newspapers was Phileas Fogg, so it was hard to avoid the subject. "Well, gentlemen," Thomas said, "Phyllis has 1/4 of an hour left before his time runs out. Do you think he'll make it?" Andrew said if he had been on a 723 train from Liverpool, he would have been here already. I think we've won. I don't think we should be too quick to count him out just yet, Samuel said. Phyllis always arrives exactly on time. Thomas said, but the fact remains the entire trip was a bit of gamble. Even a delay of just one day could have ruined his chances of getting back in time. He has lost, gentlemen. He has lost, Andrew insisted. The only steamer he could have been on was the China. And I know for a fact he wasn't. My guess is that he's at least 20 days behind. It was now 8:40, sorry. Only 5 minutes remain, Ralph said. I guess Andrew will be cashing his check at the bank tomorrow. The five gentlemen looked at one another. They were all nervous. They tried to pick up their cards and finish the hand, but no one could take his eyes off the clock. The seconds started to count down 50, 51, 52. At 55, a great noise followed by applause was heard outside. All five men stood up from their seats. At the 57th second, Phileas Fogg opened the door of the grand room and said, "Here I am, gentlemen. Phileas Fogg has made it around the world in 80 days. He had won the bet, but how? Where had he lost a day? Especially for someone who kept such exact time." It seemed that Phileas and Passepartout had forgotten to consider the different time zones around the world. As they traveled east, they gained an hour here and there. By the time they got back to London, they had gained an entire day. If only their watches had marked the days instead of just hours, they would have known this. So Phileas had not lost his fortune, and for this, he was quite happy. But he did have one question. Would Odo still marry him? "I think I should ask the question," she said. "Now that you are rich again, would you still like to marry me?" "My dear Oda," he answered, "if it were not for you, I would not have any money at all. If you hadn't asked me to marry you, Passepartout never would have gone to see the Reverend." "Oh dear Phileas," she said, "how wonderful you are." 2 days later, Phileas and Oda were married. Passepartout continued to be their butler and was quite happy in his job. Phileas Fogg had won the wager and made a grand tour around the world. He rode an elephant, bought a boat, took many trains, sailed on many steamers, and had a great adventure. And what had he gained for his trouble? Well, a wonderful woman who made him truly happy indeed. And isn't that just enough for any good man? That's it for chapter 17. Thank you.